at least 50% of what I deal with and help churches is kid comes into Sunday school class, reports something. Maybe he's observing at home or she. Maybe they are also observing with some friends. They go over to their house that are from school or some play group. And the church is like, wait, we care about them. What do we do? And how do we handle it?
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Leading Smart podcast. We're in season 3, Leading in Real Time, and we have invited our wonderful friend, Keith Richardson, to join us. He's from Michael Best, one of our favorite lawyers. Because I have to say because your colleague James is our other favorite lawyer. So we can have two favorite lawyers.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But Keith, you know this because you are one of our amazing partners here at Leading Smart, and you join us at our gatherings. But something that comes up every single time we do our pre surveys for our gatherings is what are the top legal issues that churches are facing that we need to know about. And so we love asking you and James this question because you guys are boots on the ground. You're in and out of so many churches every single month. And especially right now, and just the climate that we're in, there's a lot of change happening, whether it's technology or, internationally or here domestically, just lots of change happening in our world. And so I would love to hear from you today. What are the top legal issues that executive pastors, lead pastors, senior level staff at churches that you guys work with are facing? So, um, I would love to just kind of start. You can guide, and then I'm sure I'll ask you some follow up questions as we go. But yeah, what are you hearing out there?
Yeah, well, thank you first for having me, Holly. It's a pleasure to work with you and Leading Smart, and just so thankful for what you guys do. Um, yeah, so James and I work with probably around 400 churches and Christian nonprofit ministries of varying different types nationwide, from Southern California, LA area, to Raleigh, North Carolina, where I reside, and then everywhere in between North and South, Texas, Chicago, New York, Florida, Atlanta, the list goes on. And so it's really neat just to, I mean, A, have that privilege to have a bird's eye view and then even detailed view into everything. Let me kind of give some top of mind hot legal issues right now. There's probably five.
Okay.
And some of these might even be that sometimes they shift depending on what's going on in the news and the culture, but most of these are regardless of what's happening.
Yeah.
The first I would say is probably child protection and then abuse prevention or child abuse reporting. And whether there's an allegation with respect to the church, or a lot of times it's the church has been faced with, hey, we just learned this difficult information from a child or from somebody, but it's not connected to our church, but we've heard about it. And what do we need to do?
Yeah.
So I'll go into further bits on that part in a moment here. The second is likely more culturally relevant, specifically freedom of religion and your right to worship when you're a gathered assembly at a church, or even just, maybe you've got a home church or you're praying kind of as a small group or something like that out in the open.
Mm.
What are your rights? Your freedom of religion, First Amendment rights, both under the U.S. Constitution and your particular state's constitution, and just freedom of speech, like the right for protesters. Does that trump the freedom of religion right? So that's been top of mind the past 2-3 months here.
Definitely. Yeah.
Employment issues, both on the reactive and proactive side. Sin is sin. The reality that sin exists is true, and that's ultimately why Jesus came to
Mm.
save us. Sin still exists within the church, and unfortunately, sometimes even on staff, and we've helped a lot of churches over the years navigate difficult exits after some immorality has been discovered. Maybe it's an affair of a staff member, a pastor, maybe it's a substance abuse, drug addiction, maybe it's something else. How do you navigate offboarding? And then how do you, have better accountability protection measures there?
Yeah.
So that's certainly one. Another big one that I think has existed for as long as I've been working with churches is operating governing documents, namely a church's bylaws. And when I
Yeah.
refer to bylaws, I mean the Constitution and bylaws together that sets out, hey, this is how we're structured. We have members or we don't. We've got a board of directors, whether you call them elders or oversight team or deacons or whatever you want to call them, and a lot of other nuances there. I'll talk about how important it is to have those documents and then have them tailored to how the church is actually operated and structured.
Yeah. We
Um,
could not agree more with you. I'm excited to unpack that more because it's probably like when you hear, I know you have one more to share with us, but when you hear the
yeah.
list of the top 5, that one probably is like yawn, like boring for most of our listeners. But time and time again, when we're working on the org structure side, or even where there's dysfunction on the board or senior level staff, it always goes back to miscommunication or missed expectations that could have been solved had they had better bylaws. So, say it again for the person in the back. Effective board governance and bylaw documents are so important. So, what's the 5th one?
Yeah. Yeah. So last but not least, and it's changing rapidly, is AI,
Yeah.
artificial intelligence. In both, I mean, every church, at least large churches that we work with nationwide, and even smaller, medium size, I would guarantee that their staff is using AI in some context.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's harmful. I'm not always saying that's helpful. But the important thing is to understand how you should approach staff members using that, the parameters, what they can use, and then consider some of the implications from it. And so I'll talk about all of that too.
Yeah.
um, yeah.
That's
So
so quick recap. So we had safety, which usually is around child abuse cases or
yeah.
allegations. The second one is right to worship. Third is around org transitions, usually at the senior leadership level. Fourth, board governance and bylaws. And then the fifth is AI. So those are the top 5 issues that you guys are hearing or working with churches on right now. So let's talk about that first one around safety when it comes to child abuse allegations, etc. This one to me is something that we often don't think about until it's too late, in the sense where it's
Yeah.
reactionary. So what can churches do to safeguard, and get ahead of the horrible situations that we read in the news or hear about online?
Yeah, no, great question. So, first, I'll just start with the reality of sin.
Yeah.
Sin is deceptive, sin is misleading. And when you look at abuse, whether it's child abuse or adult abuse, abuse is naturally a deceptive act. And so I've done a lot of investigations into allegations of abuse. I have counseled and represented churches when they were being sued over abuse. And I always kind of come in with that, the pulse, my finger on the pulse saying, hey, could this have been a deceptive act? Could somebody have really been trying to pull the covers over someone? And oftentimes, sometimes we see that, sometimes we don't. But what's probably missing in several situations is some proactive measures of, hey, let's make sure that the church, including the staff and super important volunteers, especially those volunteers who work with students and children in the student and children's ministries, have a good understanding of what those measures are.
Yeah.
Again, understanding sin is sin, it's deceptive. You can't catch everything out there, but if you've got good preventative measures, it's at least going to make the person stop and think, wait, hold on, I don't want to do this, at least not here.
Mhm.
So, first is having some really key and good child protection and safety policies. Our firm has drafted those. There's a lot of different ministries out there, Ministry Safe, a host of others that can help you put together good templates. Now, here's the thing, especially, and we'll talk about this later with AI, you can find a host of templates online. You can go to your next door, down the road, sister church that's, in your same kind of bucket realm of where your church is and say, hey, give us your child protection and safety policies. That might get you half the way there, if even that. They actually have to be tailored to you.
Mhm.
So, is your church comprised of primarily staff that's orchestrating and overseeing and discipling the students and children? Or is it a mix up of staff and volunteers, or heavier on the volunteer side? You've got to flesh that out in your student safety and abuse prevention policies. And then there's got to be the proper kind of reporting channel. I mean, I know, Holly, you guys are so key on, especially in the org world. Hey, who reports to who? Who's got oversight here? And it's the same thing in the student and children ministry,
Yeah.
especially with volunteers. Hey, I'm a volunteer in a Sunday school class or life group or whatever you want to call it for students or kids. Who do I, as a fourth grade Sunday school teacher, report to should I become aware of some allegation of abuse? And key thing to understand is it may not always be, in fact, often it's not, an allegation of abuse that is alleged to have taken place at the church or by a church staff person or volunteer. At least 50% of what I deal with and help churches is kid comes into Sunday school class, reports something, maybe he's observing at home or she, maybe they are also observing with some friends. They go over to their house that are from school or some play group. And the church is like, wait, we care about them. What do we do? And how do we handle it?
Yes.
I'll get a little more in depth on that in a moment, but it's helpful to have a clear organization chart flow that says, hey, Sunday school teacher, this is who you report to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so helpful,
That's,
Keith, especially because high capacity volunteers will be asking these questions. And if you don't have an
yeah.
answer for it, a lot of our, people that we wish would be volunteering in our kids ministry. I mean, there's no church that says, "Hey, we're good. We don't need any more volunteers in the kids ministry." Every
Yeah.
church we work with needs more volunteers. And those that are high capacity volunteers are the ones they want to know what's protocol. Have you thought through this? What is, the org
Yeah.
church structure? What do we what who do we go to if we hear these things? And so really appreciate that challenge on helping us get our ducks in a row there.
Yeah, and also then just say, with respect to the actual substance of the child safety and abuse prevention policies, I mean, those are going to be rather detailed, and you want volunteers to have a copy and review it. You also, of course, want staff to know it, and the best practice is to give it to them, whether it's emailed or electronically accessed, and they have to sign and affirm that they've read it.
Yeah.
There's, you can get as detailed as you want, but a couple of key points is, first the no adult alone with a single child at any time. So there's always got to be at least two adults, whether volunteers or volunteers and staff or whatever it might be. None of this one-on-one sort of situation or one adult for 4 or 5 kids or whatever it might be. I think all churches know that, they understand it. It's not only a good prevention measure, but it's also a safety precaution so that you as an adult volunteer don't get accused of doing something. You're like, I didn't do that. If the church doesn't have a camera in that specific Sunday school classroom, wherever it might be, which oftentimes they don't,
Hmm.
then hey, you can say, well, let's go talk to the other volunteer in that class.
Yeah.
When it comes to when you get to students, especially high school, but also even middle school, no one-on-one direct private communications through text messaging, Facebook DMs, Instagram DMs, certainly Snapchat. I mean, a host of other sort of social media or private messaging platforms. No one-on-ones with an adult, whether a volunteer, staff, and a student. We just say completely no. If the student ministry still wants to permit that, I would recommend it go through a messaging app system. And I know,
Mm.
I mean, Holly, we've heard of some great groups. I'm sure I
Yeah.
forgot some of their names, but you can
Yeah.
share some of them.
Yeah.
I'd recommend those groups. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up because one of our other leading smart partners is Intulse, Intulse, and they have this really cool communication app where you can not only have all direct messages go through this app, it feels on the receiver end, it feels just like text messaging. You have a number, you text it, but it's a church-owned phone number, church-owned messaging system, and then the other thing that's helpful about that is you can tag in. So let's say, Keith, you were the, male student pastor and I'm the female student pastor, and one of us is out on PTO. I can say, "Hey,
Yeah.
Keith, could you take over if I get any incoming messages since I'm going to be on vacation this week? Could you handle those messages?" Or vice versa, or if there's an assistant. So you can delegate access. So,
It's great.
and to your point, what I've heard in that is it also protects. So you can tell that youth volunteer or pastor, say, "Hey, we can't protect you if you're direct messaging through your text messages or your Instagram. But if it's through the
Yeah.
churches, we have access to that and we can help make sure we get ahead of any of those issues that might be happening." So, yeah, always a
Yeah.
good man. We could do a whole podcast, I feel like, just on children and youth safety because
Yeah.
it's so important. I mean, and we're both parents and just know
Yeah.
how important that is. So, talk to
Yeah.
us about
No, that's great.
the right to worship because this has been in the news lately
Yeah.
with, there was the protest that showed up at that church a couple weeks ago. So yeah, just
Yeah.
curious what's front of mind for church leaders that you're talking to around this point.
Yeah. So, every jurisdiction can be a little different, but generally speaking, across the nation, from basically every 50 state, your freedom to worship, your right to worship, which is protected under the First Amendment to the United States Constitution and then also likely your individual state's constitution, it's protected and it's paramount and it trumps any right to protest. And what I always say is let's just take a step back, like a little historical lesson. Let's go back to the Mayflower. Let's go back to Great Britain. Why did we ultimately come over to the US and form our own nation? It's because, hey, we wanted to have the right to worship. And we didn't want another colony or organization or country or whatever saying, hey, this is how you can worship. This is who you can worship. This is the manner and method you can do it. The First Amendment freedom of religion clause guaranteed that and said, hey, no, you've got the free exercise of your religion. You can do that. And so, it's wherever you land on the political spectrum, I certainly, respect individuals' rights to protest, peacefully protest whatever they might disagree with in the government or what might be going on. At the same time, that right to worship is protected. It's paramount. And you can't just bust in and interrupt a worship service. We've got a lot of calls and emails from churches right after that happened in the Twin Cities saying, well, what do we do here and how can we do that? I'm thankful to see that there have been, I guess, at least some federal prosecutions of the individuals who disrupted that. That should be protected. And basically every church that I talk with would agree. And they're really concerned about what happens and what do we do when we come in. That parlays a little bit into church safety, more of, hey, do we have, assigned officers, both on duty and maybe off duty officers, and then a security training team? That's kind of really how you handle some of that. But at the end of the day, the First Amendment freedom to worship, the free exercise of your religion, trumps a protester's right to come in and interrupt what you're doing in your worship gathering.
Yeah, thank you for, and not only do every time I talk to you, you're like following the news, you're following cases. I know you have to do that because of the role that you play, your job. But that one has been so top of mind. And both of the gatherings that we just did, this was a topic that came up over and over again. All right, number three, you
Yeah.
mentioned, especially at the senior level, org transitions that can be messy, and you guys are getting that call when it's like, please help us. We're in the news, or it's been, we're in the press, or our board is, just in complete upheaval because there's not alignment on how we should handle this transition. So, my question
Yeah.
again is, what can we do as church leaders to get ahead of these situations so we're not always on the defensive?
Yep. Yeah, no, that's great. So I think it's first, these situations come up in a proactive and then a reactive stance. So let's talk about the proactive. Let's talk about where, the senior pastor knows at some point they're going to step down and they're going to make a transition. What we always love to see is getting a proactive understanding of what that's going to look like, certainly months, if not years in advance. How's that going to flesh out? Who's going to, is there a new pastor search committee, team? Who's responsible for that? Does that then go to like a board of directors to vote on as well as the congregation? And then understanding how that's going to happen. And primarily so that that senior pastor, lead pastor, at least has it in their head that this is coming instead of just, hey, I'm going to plop this on the desk and you know what? I'm going to move along. I get it. I mean, I love my job. And if I was the lead pastor of a large church, I would not always want to leave. I would enjoy probably what I get to do, just like I enjoy being an attorney, a partner here at Michael Best. But thinking through that and just thinking through that transition, it not only helps the lead pastor get ready for it, but also helps them think about what's next.
Yeah.
And I have seen a lot of lead pastors do really good transitions, and they're doing great kingdom minded work for the greater gospel. I mean, they're going over, to the outskirts, maybe even into Ukraine and helping with what's going on there in the church. They're speaking at churches nationwide. They're helping other churches that are struggling or going through transitions, give some real wisdom there. So being proactive, thinking through that, how it's going to happen, having a plan set out on paper is really good. So I'll pause there on the proactive. And Holly, I'm sure you can add a
Oh
boatload
man.
there.
Yes, that's one of the reasons why we love working with you and James at Michael Best is because we do so much work around succession planning. And you nailed it. That identity piece is often what holds that process back from being effective because you and I would both have trouble leaving our roles because we love the work we do. And so one of the things we see is that if your lead pastor is feeling like they're leaving something behind, rather than feeling excited about moving towards something else, that's where that identity piece can often be disrupted. And so we hold on for much longer than we should because we don't have that thing that we're looking forward to. And so we like to
Yeah.
start with churches on succession about 3 to 5 years out, just like you said, like years ahead.
Great.
Well, first of all, we always say, which I know you would agree, is like in your, which we'll talk about next, in your bylaws, even if it's just, a paragraph of for an emergency succession. If your
Yeah.
lead pastor it couldn't show up tomorrow for whatever reason, which God
Yeah.
forbid that would happen, but you and I have both gotten calls where that has happened. There should be just a paragraph that helps the board know how do we have order then as we go get help,
Yeah.
so start with just an emergency succession plan, even if it's just a paragraph in your bylaws. And then, being proactive if you're thinking about a retirement succession about 3 to 5 years out to begin having those conversations. It gives you lots of runway, working with us at Leading Smart with Michael Best to make sure all that's buttoned up so there's clarity and we can
Yeah.
celebrate rather than just we've seen just some really poor transitions that leaves the church really in a mess, and it didn't have to be that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. No, so true. So true. That's great. Let me kind of hit briefly then on the reactive. And this is
Yes.
more, I would put in the unfortunate bucket.
Yeah.
Every month, I mean, I don't know, it's at least one, if not three or four of these, we'll get calls from a church where more often than not, it is not the lead pastor. I mean, very rare we've had that, but it's maybe somebody who's could be in a senior position, whether they're a pastor, like an associate or worship pastor or student ministry pastor, or they're just on staff and they have had an immoral qualification, disqualification from ministry.
Yeah.
I see it across the board. It can be on the lower end, maybe more of an inappropriate communication between a married staffer and somebody else. It could be, on the higher end, an egregious affair, a sexual, a physical affair.
Mhm.
It could be substance abuse, drug addiction, alcohol addiction.
Fraud,
I
finances, we've seen that before. Yeah.
Yeah, fraud. I mean, even embezzlement, God forbid.
Mm.
So, what do you do there? And a lot of times churches are panicking. I'm thankful that at least for the church clients we work with, we are their first call. And it's both a legal consideration, like a risk management understanding, as well as even kind of communications and public relations. On the legal, what we're really asking is, how did this happen? Were there accountability structures that failed? And then really, hey, has anyone been impacted in the church? So if there has been somebody that's had an alcohol or drug addiction, let's say it's a student pastor, you're making sure that that did not seep out beyond the pastor to students.
Yeah.
Of course, you hope it didn't. If you've heard about an affair or an emotional attachment that is improper outside the bounds of marriage, of course, you're also asking, hey, was there an opportunity for this person, this staff person, to engage in that with anybody else on staff? And so you're kind of crossing your T's, dotting your I's there. And then you're learning how to understand your congregation, how they might view this departure. More often than not, honesty and being forthright is the best bet. You're not going to give away every details. Some employment law perspectives are just protected under employment laws, and so you can't give everything away. But it's better to share as much as you possibly can than say, hey, guess what? They're gone.
Mhm.
Each scenario is different.
Mm.
But if you can say at least, hey, they have had an immoral, disqualifying act or conduct that disqualifies them from the ministry, and then maybe even give some parameters around potentially what it was or what it was not. Like, hey, it was not child abuse,
Yeah.
or it was not, at least to put people's minds at ease with respect to that subject. So giving more is helpful. And that way people will understand it still might be hard, but then they can move on and say, we trust the church and the leadership because they're being forthright with us. Once they've discovered this, they're letting us know.
Yeah, there's a great quote that says, "When clarity lacks, negativity fills the void." And so,
Yeah.
working with you guys in those situations to help go, okay, what can we share that provides clarity, and what can we not share that's going to cause even more, fear or concern or et cetera. So,
Yeah.
and sometimes that can be a fine line. So, working with an expert like you guys who've been down that road many, many times.
Yeah. Well, and let me add too, it depends a lot. Sometimes depends how the employee is reacting to the situation.
That's true.
I have worked with a good amount of situations where fortunately, once the employee was caught, whether it's a pastor or some staff member, employee on the church staff, they ultimately confess. And I'd say actually maybe more than 50% of the time that's the scenario. And that's great because it's no longer like, did they do this? You're saying, hey, now that you've confessed and repented, let's help your soul, let's help your heart. The church is going to do that. And if they got a spouse and family, they're still going to help them more likely than not. The situation where that staff member pastor is not confessing and is still saying, this wasn't me, I didn't do that, or whatever, that's hard. And that's obviously where then the communication is a different structure because more often than not, they're probably claiming defamation. There's ways to get around that, but depending on the facts, it can make it a lot more sticky. And that's why working with a good legal team throughout that is going to be good for the church.
Yeah.
So
And you guys also have PR as an extension of your services
yeah,
that if that's needed, you have folks that you can bring in to help with that. So, which is so helpful
we do.
depending on
Yeah.
how public the situation is. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, board governance, the one I got really passionate about in our overview, but and
Yep.
we could do, I mean, honestly, maybe we should do like a whole topic on this because this has been this has come up. Tim and I are doing a lot of work right now on leadership restructuring, board restructuring, and so bylaws are coming up over and over and over again. So what are
Yeah.
your, top level advice when we're thinking about board governance and bylaws?
Yeah, no, I love it. So, and for everyone who's about to fall asleep, let me
Yeah.
just, I will, I will say something that will make you not fall asleep, especially if you're in a leadership role at a church, like an executive pastor, lead pastor, whatever it might be. There is personal liability for leaders of churches in the executive pastor, board of director role who are not complying with bylaws. And I hate to say that, but if you've got bylaws that are outdated and they're dusty, and or maybe they're not 30 years outdated, but they're 6 years outdated, you stole them from some other church, not stolen, you just got them from some other church, you got them online, maybe you use ChatGPT to help craft it, but they're not tailored to your church and how your church is structured and operated, they're no good. You need bylaws that ultimately say, this is how we're structured. We have a board, most states' nonprofit corporation acts that govern nonprofits, which are generally speaking what churches are. You don't have to be a nonprofit corporation, but a lot of our clients are. They will say that you have to have a board of directors. Now, you can also delegate the authority that a board of directors would ordinarily encompass and have to one person. I don't like to do that. There's a host of reasons. It just puts a lot of the onus and the pressure and potential liability on that person, who's namely likely the senior pastor. But the Nonprofit Corporation Act of your state will probably say you need a board of directors. So let's set that out. Do you have members? How do you become a member? What type of members are they? Guess what? If you don't flesh out some of the details on membership and a host of other provisions, you are going to default to your state's Nonprofit Corporation Act. And some of the provisions then about membership could potentially apply. Like, hey, a member can ask for detailed financial records of a church. If you don't want that, you need to work with an attorney to structure your bylaws to make sure that that can't be accessed. Or if you want that, you got to work with us as well too. There's a lot of other provisions that are helpful in bylaws. The key thing, though, is to recognize you need bylaws that are tailored to you. Getting a template from online, from Google or ChatGPT or whatever, well, it might get you like 20% of the way there. It's not any good unless it's structured to how you actually operate.
Mm.
And then where I think attorneys and you all add real value, Holly, is when we come in and say, okay, well, that's a cool organization method here or structure, but actually, here's some pitfalls. I can come in and say, from the legal perspective, here's how I've seen churches face liability or even lawsuits because I've defended those, I've represented church in those. And here's maybe another way to successfully think about how to structure it.
Yes, it's so good because we do a lot of work on helping boards shift from, which actually the episode, yeah, they just went like, we're recording this on a Tuesday where we just published an episode that was about the shifts that boards need to make from managing to governing boards. I was just working with a
Yeah.
church a few weeks ago where their board was making HR decisions, personnel decisions. And so that's a whole nother level of potential liability there that lay
Yes.
leaders are making with the best intentions, but without the context. And so I think you said this, the first statement that you said, which I'm sure Yeah, for those who were falling asleep, their eyes got big. The personal liability, but it's also a stewardship issue. Like if we're not paying attention to setting up our church from a governance perspective, then we that's poor stewardship. And so
Yeah.
to be able to, and you don't have to do it alone. I mean, if you're like me where yeah, this stuff makes me want to yawn, like I'm not process oriented. I don't like, being put in a box, and so many entrepreneurial pastors feel the same way. But look
Yeah.
at this as helping you be able to have like the sandbox that you can play in so that you
Yeah.
can, make sure that you're protecting yourself and the church to be able to fulfill the mission that God's called you to.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to look at bylaws. It's the contract that governs your church
Yeah.
in a larger sense. And so whenever we are pulled in and there is maybe infighting within a church, maybe there's members that disagree with each other, or there's a fraction of members that disagree with the church leadership. We're going back to the bylaws and saying, okay, well, who has the authority to make this decision? And then how is the vote structured? And as long as we follow that process, then great, we're good. One top of mind thing is to have each church should have their statement of faith, the particulars of the statement of faith fleshed out in their bylaws. I mean, this is obviously who you believe, God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, the Trinity. I mean, the list goes on. You're going to flesh out those kind of key components. But then culturally relevant topics like marriage, gender, sexuality, that list is really important because that sets the world on notice as to who you are and your members on notice of that. There's a specific provision that I like to see churches include in their bylaws that says, hey, the church cannot use any of its property, whether real property like physical property or intangible property like trademarks or IP or whatever, that contravenes in whole or part its statement of faith. So if, another
Wait,
group wants
sorry,
to come
Keith.
in and
For the
say,
non-lawyer, what do you mean contravene? Like contradicts?
yes, I'm sorry, contradicts, disagrees with.
What does that mean in layman's terms?
Yes, yes, sorry. Yeah, contradicts, disagrees with.
Okay.
So, for instance, if another faith organization that is not Christian wanted to come in and host their community bazaar where they sell T-shirts and then they also sell, food, and it promotes in large part their faith,
Mhm.
you can say no. We can't allow that because our bylaws don't permit that. And you've got
Yeah.
something to rest on. Now, you might have some other freedom of religion principles that you can rest on outside of that context, but it's helpful to have that already solidified
So
in
good.
your bylaw.
Yeah, just a
Yeah.
good practical like line that you like to see in there. Okay,
Yep.
last but not least, AI. We just got this question at our lead pastor gathering, and then a follow up of folks asking for AI policies. So, and we've Tim and I, are huge proponents of AI. And what we love about you guys is you're going yes, but or yes, and keep these things in
Yeah.
mind. So, what should we be thinking about as church leaders from a stewardship perspective around AI and setting our church staff up for success when it comes to AI?
Yeah. AI, I mean, it's huge. And to the people that are not familiar with it or are not using it, I'm certainly not berating you, but I almost view it as, emails and computers 40 years ago.
Exactly.
You got to get on the bandwagon. You have to understand how it operates. You may not want to use it, but it can actually be a good tool. I mean, my law firm, we pay for several subscriptions. We utilize it. It helps our clients actually.
Mhm.
Now, I don't utilize it to substitute my judgment. I don't utilize it to make the end all work product, but I'm going to utilize it to help me get there. It saves my clients monies.
I was about to
Um,
say, Keith, I would not wanna work with a lawyer who's not using it because that means I'm paying you probably 3 times the amount of money of what it should take you now that you have this amazing tool in your tool belt.
yeah, yeah,
Yes, exactly.
yeah. So a good example is like in the lawyer world, we might draft a motion for an extension of time to respond to a particular motion. That's something that I can easily use an AI tool to generate fairly quick for me. And then I'll jump in and spend the remaining portion getting it tidied up and ready.
Yeah.
Um, for churches, I already I mean, you said policies, AI policies. Churches need to have AI policies, whether or not they are endorsing the use of an AI tool like ChatGPT, or they don't want their staff members to use it. They need to have a policy that says you can use it and this is how, or you can't use it and this is how. And then the defined limitations. We've worked with churches from the spectrum of, hey, you can use it to no, you can't. What I like to see if churches use it is, hey, let's make sure the employees of the church are only using a paid AI subscription tool that the church has already purchased. We're not using ChatGPT for free out on the web
No.
because you're probably inputting some confidential information or something that you just don't want to go out on the web. So let's use some paid AI subscription tool the church has. And then second, it's helpful to tell them you can't use this to ultimately create what we hire you to do. If it's going to say, well, hey, we're going to help start the rough draft of a security draft policy, that's fine. But if it's drafting a sermon in its entirety, if it is drafting a new, kids ministry curriculum in its entirety, that's a problem because at the end of the day, what the church has hired you to do is you, as a believer with the Holy Spirit in your heart, seeking God's guidance, you're giving the direction in teaching curriculum. And so you can use it to help as a research tool and help you get some of the nuts and bolts. But outside of that, you don't want to have it completely create everything because then you kind of run the risk of usurping your fiduciary duty, your legal fiduciary obligation to the church in the role that you've been hired for.
Yeah. I would add to that what I don't want is for church leaders to feel, or anyone to feel, guilt and shame. I'm seeing this a lot in the work that I do. It's like, oh, there's like the shame around using AI. Because I agree with you. I think, not even, I was going to say 10 years from now. I think it's going to be like 2 years from now.
Yeah.
That like,
Oh, it's going to
just
be
like
fast.
we,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like, just like we purchase our employees a laptop and an email subscription, like it will just be part of it. There are so many opportunities for churches from an operational perspective. I was just reading on a thread that was really blowing my mind earlier this morning. I'm like, I saved it so I could go back to it because I'm like, I don't even understand what these people are saying. But using
Yeah.
Claude Cowork, which I haven't yet tapped into, Claude Cowork is a new um, feature that they released where building agents to do a lot of operational activity. For example, how this applies to church.
Yep.
One of the biggest pain points we're seeing with churches right now is data, like in our CRMs, like or our CHMS, I should say, where we're
Yeah.
paying all this money for a CHMS that's outdated because people aren't, going in and updating their information. Like that is a constant frustration around all the churches we work with. So I was reading
Yeah.
on a thread, it was a business, but I was like, wait, churches could use this where they're integrating using Claude Cowork to create an agent that updates their CHMS so that we have the most updated contact information for people in small groups, et cetera. So, like, to me, that's a great example where I don't want people to like withhold experimenting with these tools out of fear that they're going to be replaced. That's a great opportunity to go to your leadership team and say, hey, I want to explore how we could use this to help increase productivity and efficiency so I can be freed up to do other things because you're paying me and I don't want
Yeah.
you to pay me to import data
Yeah.
into a database that now AI could do. I would rather you pay me to solve problems that only I can solve, right? And so
Yes.
I just want
Yes.
to you know, just encourage folks around that. But that's why we should have policies to, again, it's not about stifling creativity. It's about being clear about the
Yeah.
space that we can play in so that we can go
Yeah.
create awesome sandcastles.
Yeah, yeah, 100% agree. And I mean, even to kind of further land the plane there on technical aspects of like, hey, let's understand data. Let's understand how many people are coming in, who's coming in, that is the congregation in our church, or let's understand financial giving trends. I think AI is going to be a really good tool there. I mean, in one sense, people, I'm sure CEOs, executive pastors of churches might be freaking out saying, gosh, that could eliminate some jobs in our church. But if you take a broader macro look at economies, once some jobs are eliminated, others are created for that. So you might no
Creative
longer need.
destruction. It's an economic term called creative destruction that I love.
Yes, yes. You might no longer need one person to, generate the data and extrapolate it because AI will soon take that over, but you're going to have some other position that will be created from it.
Yeah.
Um, when it comes though down to the content created,
Yes.
pastors the end of the day, and just like a kid's ministry curriculum creator or a worship pastor, they are all paid and sought after, but well, not paid directly by the church members, but people go to church because they want to hear the word of God through the Holy Spirit speaking through them. And that's something that ChatGPT AI cannot replace.
Yeah.
I remember hearing last year at the Gospel Coalition, I didn't attend, but I watched some of the clips and I saw John Piper read out a script of a prayer that was, I believe, generated by AI. And he said, that's got no heart. That's got no desire, no God loving, God glorifying hope, desire within that. It might sound good, but it wasn't generated from the heart. And actually, what we're ultimately changing is the heart. So,
That's great.
um, but pastors know that, they get it. They're not using ChatGPT to write up their entire sermon, but it can be a very helpful research tool to get them part of the way there, just like they're already using Google for. So,
Exactly. Yep. That's awesome. Well, Keith, so quick recap again. We talked about the 5 key issues that you're helping churches with right now, the most. You're helping with a lot more than this, but these are the ones that are coming up the most right now. Safety, specifically around child abuse allegations. The second one is right to worship, and that First Amendment right. The third one is transitions, especially at the senior level, both on the proactive side and reactive side, board governance and bylaws, and then AI. And we are just so thankful for you and James and your entire team at Michael Best.
yeah,
What we love about Michael Best is not only, your team on the faith-based side, your heart for the church, and that you both, serve churches, you're involved in your local churches. I learned a fun fact about James that he was actually on a church staff and he's wicked at the piano. Didn't know that until last week when we were at the same conference.
yeah,
But yeah, and also that through Michael Best, you all have access to nationwide resources that you wouldn't have on your own if you were, just James and Keith, the James and Keith show. You have access to, specialists and experts in specific areas. So no matter what areas your clients are facing, you're able to help and resource them. So is there anything else that our audience should know about Michael Best that you want to share?
yeah. No, thanks, Holly. I mean, I think you hit it. The great thing is that, I mean, we're around 400 attorneys nationwide. So we have offices from LA to Chicago to Raleigh, North Carolina, Austin, Texas, Denver, Colorado, and everywhere in between. And so we can work with churches nationwide. And as you said, because of the depth of who we are beyond just the James and Keith show and even the team that works around us, we can tap from attorneys who have specialized employee benefits experiments or excuse me, or whatever else it might be, corporate restructuring in the nonprofit world. We've got that expertise that we can jump in and assist. So,
That's awesome.
yeah, thanks for asking.
Okay, well, my last question for you, we have a fun segment, on every Leading Smart episode. So my question for you is, what is something that we can't find out about you on your resume or your bio? And I always like it to be, something fun that we might surprise
Yeah.
us about you.
Yeah, well, I'm going to brag on my wife here because she deserves all the credit or a lot of the credit.
Hmm.
So I guess two things. First, I met my wife in a way that I swore to God that I would never want to meet her in, and it was actually through our church's single ministry. Um,
Awesome.
I grew up going to a fantastic church, but I always said I am never going to go to the singles ministry because by the time I get out of college, I'm going to have a spouse and it's going to be fine. Lo and behold, that was not God's plan for me. And I finished my first year of law school. I was living back that summer with my parents, was doing an internship for a judge that summer. And my church had a thriving and very large singles ministry. And that's where I ended up meeting my wife. So God's always got a great sense of humor there. He said, yeah, Keith, that's how it's going to work out.
That's awesome.
But bragging briefly on my wife, she taught first grade for 8 years, and then a little over a year, well, around a year ago, just started working with actually a client of ours. They're a great Christian nonprofit ministry in the Raleigh area that works with refugees. A lot of them are from Afghanistan, some from South America. They've resettled in the Raleigh, North Carolina area, and she teaches ESL, English as a second language, to them. Most of them, this is the advanced level, so they know how to talk and converse, but they're trying to get better.
That's
They're trying to get better because they want to get out of that factory job so they can move up and actually have a life here in America. And it's just great seeing her doing that, being able to volunteer her and give her time. I'm just so proud of her and that I can support her in that endeavor. And
That's
so, yeah.
awesome. So such important work. I was just recently I had my last 2 Uber rides last week because I was you and I were both traveling a lot last week. So I was in a lot of Uber rides, but both of them got to just know them and hear their stories, and they were both, immigrants to America,
Mm,
and we were just talking about how so many of us just take for granted the life that we get to live here. And
yeah.
it's just such a good reminder for all of us to and the wonderful frontline work that your wife is doing for folks who want to build a life here that we are just so lucky to be able to do. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
all right, Keith. Well, thanks for joining us today. I know it is always a treat to talk to you and get free legal advice. I mean, there you go. Keith always makes a joke that if you want free legal advice, you can, take him out golfing. So,
Please. Yes. Yeah.
but yeah,
Uh,
and they can find more out about we'll put this, in the show notes, but michaelbest.com. But also you can reach out to me and Tim if your church if you're like, "Man, we really need to talk to Keith." Please feel free to email us. We would be glad to make a personal connection. We are so grateful to you, Keith and James and the whole Michael Best team for the support of Leading Smart and the support of so many of our clients. You guys are doing great work.
well, thank you. And the same sentiments for you and Tim. So thankful for the work that you guys do for churches and appreciate you having me on.